Hey everyone, welcome to the Bookish Wonderland. It's your host, Ari, and today's episode is all about TBRs. What is a TBR? My TBR, all things, okay? And it's funny because I wanted to do this episode because on social media, especially on Instagram, I've been noticing this stigma lately with the pressure of getting through your TBR, no matter how big or small it is. And like this weird sort of like pressure or competition that readers are putting on themselves to get through their TBR. If you're a brand new reader or new to the bookish community, TBR simply means to be read. That's literally it. To be read is a list of books. It's a collection of books that you have the intention of reading or that you want to read and you haven't picked up yet. That is all a TBR is. And you might go on social media or a website or like your reading tracker, reading database like Goodreads or Fable or Storygraph, and you can see your friends' TBRs, their list of books that they want to read. And I was noticing all these TBR challenges on social media. Like, I have over 200 books on my TBR and I need to get through them. So here's what I'm going to do to get through all the books on my TBR and blah, blah, blah. And it's funny because I understand the reason why some people do it, but I don't understand why everybody's doing it. And I say that to mean like, so I understand if you yourself, you have like this long list of books that you've been wanting to read for a long time, and you're cracking down on your list and you're like, okay, no more book buying, no more reading new releases or whatever. I'm going to read the books that I have, or I'm going to read the books I've been wanting to read for X amount of years now. And I get it. That's great. And then there are some people who are like, I feel like having 500 books on my TBR is ridiculous. I need to get this number down. And that's where I'm just a little confused, because so what, you have 500 books on your TBR? So what? Like, me personally, last time I checked my Goodreads, and it's been a minute since I last checked my Goodreads, but last time I checked, I had like 600 and something books in my want to read shelf. And that's just over years, honestly. Ever since I had a Goodreads, every time I saw a book that sounded interesting to me, that had a really cool cover or was by an author that I really like or wanted to get into, and I was like, okay, add them to the list. And I just continue adding them to the list, right? And the TBR over the years that I've had my Goodreads or my Fable or whatever, the list has gotten bigger and bigger. Now, also, every once in a while, I'll do a TBR clean out where I will go through my list and take off books from my TBR if I'm no longer interested in reading them. Because again, some of the books I've added when I was younger, when I was in a different place in my reading journey. And there are books on there that are probably in genres that I don't read that much or don't line up to my taste anymore. So do I still have interest in them or not? And it's funny because I'll see content creators or people do this, and I'm like, why are you putting pressure on yourselves to knock down this TBR because you have over like 100 some books on the list? In my personal opinion, your TBR is supposed to be a menu. Like, think of it like going to a restaurant, and you sit down at a restaurant, right? And you pick up a menu, and they have all these options in all these different categories. They have like 12 different appetizers. I mean, I don't know a restaurant with 12 different appetizers, but we're just going to go with it for this example. So there's 12 different appetizers. There's 10 different salads, 10 different soups. There's about 30 or so entrees, about 15 desserts. Of course, they have a massive wide, like 20 something drink selection. And then don't even get me started on the cocktail menu. They have all these different types of beers and wines and, cocktails and mocktails and specialty drinks and specialty desserts and blah, 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 whatever. And to where you're flipping through this booklet of all this food, all these options for whatever you're in the mood for. That is how a TBR is supposed to be, in my opinion. Because again, on my TBR list, it's over 600 books. There was a point in time where there was over 900 books on my TBR. And around that time is when I did my first like real TBR clean out. Like, I sat in front of my computer and was going through my Goodreads and was like, okay, I added this book back in like 2015, back when I was still a teenager. am I still interested in reading this book? And I had to like look at it, read the description again, be like, I don't think this is for me anymore, and take it off the list. There are some books that are still on that list that I'm like, it probably still lines up with my interests or my tastes. But also, then again, I'm a mood reader. So when I pick up a new book to read, I'm going based off of whatever mood I'm in. Just like when I go to a restaurant, like say I go to a ramen restaurant, they have like 12, 13 different kinds of ramen, right? But I'm in the mood for something spicy. And under their spicy menu, they have like 5 selections. Then I'm reading what's in those 5 selections. Like, this spicy ramen has like veggie broth or whatever. This spicy ramen has chicken broth. Okay, anything with chicken broth or pork broth, I don't want that. Let's look at the veggie broths. That narrows it down to 3. Okay, what's in these? Like, you narrow it down based off of your mood. And the one you select and that you land on, that's what you're going to get. That's what you're going to enjoy for your meal. That's how it should be for a TBR as well, for the book that you choose to read. And it's funny because when I was younger, I didn't really have a TBR. Not to my knowledge. Like, yes, there were books where I'd be like, okay, I'm gonna come back for you and this and that. But I didn't track it like that. The closest thing I had to tracking my TBR was my holiday wish list. Around Christmas time, my parents did this thing where my brother and I had to make a list of the top 5 things that we wanted for Christmas. Of course, number 1 being the thing that we wanted the most, like that's the thing we had to have. And then of course, 2 through 5 are your alternates in case they can't find that number 1 thing. Or if it was a good year financially for my parents, they would at least try to get us like 3 of the gifts on the list. Sometimes, not all the time, these were rare occasions, they would get all the things on the list, especially if there was like a sale or Black Friday or clearance or, or whatever. And the closest thing I had to a TBR was my Christmas wish list because my top 5 things was books. Like say, and I'm going to use these books as examples, okay? This is not a definite, accurate list, okay? So say the number 1 thing I wanted for Christmas was the Twilight box set, right? And then in case they can't get the Twilight box set, Twilight was very popular at the time when I was in middle school. Say they couldn't find that or get it, then instead of that fantasy series, I want the first 3 books of the Lord of the Rings series. That's item number 2. Or item number 3 was a standalone book. I can't think of one right now. That was item number 3. Item number 4 was the first 2 books in the selection series. And item number 5 was a copy of Frankenstein. Again, this is a random list, okay? I'm just going based off of books off the top of my head. But that would be my Christmas wish list. And that's what I would give to my parents. Sometimes they would get me all the books on the list. Or sometimes they would only be able to get me like 1 or 2 of the books on the list. And I remember one year, my mom actually came to me with my Christmas wish list and she was like, I need you to write other things. And I'm like, what are you talking about? She was like, you can't ask for just all books for Christmas. I need you to write other stuff. And I never understood why she did that to me. Like, if I'm being honest, I still don't, even in my adulthood. And I feel like one of these days I'm going to have to like hit her up and ask her like, hey, remember when I was like mad young and when I grew out of asking you for Barbie dolls and Bratz dolls and this and that and blah, 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 like toys. By the time I was in like my preteen, early teen, like between the ages of 11 and 13, around that time, I started asking for books for Christmas, either books or technology, usually like a cell phone because iPhones were like a really big thing. And every time I put all books on the list, she would be like, I need you to diversify. And I'm like, why? Just give me all books. What's the problem? Especially because, again, back then, if you listen to my last episode, back then, paperbacks used to be $10 a piece. So if you could at least get 3 of these books, that's $30 right there. It doesn't have to be the box sets or anything like that, but just, that was the closest thing I had to a TBR list. And there would be times where I would make my own list, like as like a sticky note or a note in my journal or in my notebook or whatever. Be like, okay, when I come back to the library, I need to get book 2 of this series, or I need to pick up these 2 books or whatever, and blah, blah, blah. That was the closest thing I had to a TBR list in my youth. It wasn't until I discovered Goodreads that I discovered how massive my TBR list could be and how big it would get, especially over the years. And so I started using Goodreads as my tracking database for my TBR. Like every single time I wanted to read something new, I would just open my want to read shelf and I will scroll through. I would scroll through my menu, look at the book covers, look at the titles. Of course, you could see the average rating on them, but sometimes I ignored it, sometimes I didn't. Sometimes I would sort it based off of what did I recently add or what's been on my book the longest, with the little drop down arrows. And I would just look at titles and covers that pulled me. I would open a couple of options and then flip through them to reread the descriptions and be like, this one sounds closer to the mood that I'm in. I'm going to read this. And then I would go pick that book up. And then, of course, when I started reading it, I would move it to my currently reading. And then when I finished it, I would move it to my read shelf. And that knocked a book off my TBR. But of course, in true book nerd fashion, for every book that I finished, I added 5 more. And so I was thinking about this simply because of the whole TBR challenges and things that I keep seeing. And I'm wondering, again, this isn't for everybody. This isn't something that everybody does, but it's creating this atmosphere on social media that I'm noticing where if you have so many unread books, it's a bad thing. And in my opinion, it's not. I don't think there should be this stigma on how many books you have on your TBR, especially if your TBR is physical. Now, I will say this. I think that reading and book shopping are 2 different hobbies. They can be combined, because trust me, I combine it for me. Every time I go book shopping, usually I'm picking up books that I eventually want to read. But there are people who just buy books just for the pure collection of it. I mean, books is still art. It has pretty covers, beautiful storytelling, intricate writing, depending, or interesting writing styles or interesting writing formats. Literature is a form of art. So in the way that people buy and collect paintings or sculptures or figurines, book shopping is a hobby where you're collecting art. But a lot of people get things confused or they mix them together, thinking that, I bought over 100-some books and now I have this pressure or feel pressure to read all of them. You don't necessarily have to read all of them. I mean, you're supporting an author by buying their books anyway. I think those are 2 different hobbies and people muddle them together. And then even if you're like me, where the books you buy are books you eventually want to read, and now you're standing there looking at a whole bookcase or a whole cart full of books that you haven't read yet, and you're now feeling some sort of overwhelming pressure. If that is you, I need you to take 3 deep breaths and just relax, okay? I know that social media can sometimes be overwhelming, and then there's also this feeling of FOMO, feeling of missing out, when everybody's reading the same book and you felt pressured to buy that book because of the hype, and now you're not really even in the mood to read it anymore, or you feel scared to read it because of the hype and all this and blah, blah, blah. And you buy other books and you add other books to your TBR. And now there's this huge, huge pressure, right? Relax. I understand the influence. I understand how social media can have an influence on your TBR and how you view your TBR. And that's why I had to take a step back from social media a little bit, because when I open my Fable, I acknowledge that there's over 600 books on that want to read shelf. But I break my TBR down into increments to where it's manageable for me and to where I don't feel overwhelmed. Again, I'm the kind of person where I think my TBR is just a giant freaking menu with endless options that is forever growing. There will be no end, right? But you can make micro TBRs within your big TBR. And this is something that I love that people do on social media when they make their, monthly TBRs or their seasonal TBRs or their vacation TBRs or, or whatever. If you're going on a 2-week long trip, what books are you packing with you, right? Or what books are you downloading to your e-reader to take with you? Me, I make seasonal TBRs because, again, I'm a mood reader. And sometimes when I make a list of books to read specifically in a month or in a week or whatever, I don't always stick to it I tend to go where the mood takes me, especially if I'm in a reading slump. Because if I'm in a reading slump, I'm not in the mood to read any of the novels I added to my TBR. More than likely, I'm picking up a bunch of manga or graphic novels to just binge through web series or whatever, just to get me back into the, okay, now I could read a novel kind of mood. But I like making seasonal TBRs because, one, that gives me a bigger time frame. Like, I have 3 months to read at least some of the books on this list, right? So, like, for example, I made a fall TBR. For me, fall is from beginning of September 1st, to the end of November 30th, I believe. And so I would make a list of maybe, I'm going to say 50 books. Now, am I going to read all 50 in 3 months? No. I do not have the luxury or the lifestyle to do that. Some people are able to, but I'm not one of those lucky few. So, but the 50 books is literally just an options list. I always add like a handful of romance books, a handful of fantasy books, a handful of contemporary fiction or lit fiction. I usually add in a couple of classics because I love reading classics around the fall time. Of course, some graphic novels or manga, just to break things up and to give me options so like I can hop around and won't be stuck in the same place, right? And I do that seasonally. So as long as I read like a good chunk of that TBR within those 3 months, I feel accomplished. I feel satisfied. If I don't read any of those books from the TBR, sure, part of me is going to kick myself. Part of me is going to regret it a little bit. But if I manage to read anything at all within the span of 3 months, that's still an accomplishment. Even if it's not that specific list of books from my TBR, if I read a different set of books from my TBR, like the big encompassing list, that is still an accomplishment. Because again, the whole point of reading is for your enjoyment. Whatever that enjoyment is for you, whether it's for educational purposes, entertainment purposes, just the fact that you're reading is an accomplishment. That's a good thing. So there are some people who do that. There are some people who can do a monthly TBR, be like, okay, here's the 10 books I'm going to read for the month, and they read all 10 of those books. There are some people who make a book list of 10 books a month, but only manage to read 3 or 4 of those books. That is still okay. That's 3 or 4 books off your TBR now. And maybe you can roll those other books into the next month or save them until next year or whenever you want to read them. There is no pressure. And I think that's just kind of funny. The stigma around TBRs is mostly on that. Like, oh, I feel like I have to stick to all the books on my TBR and I can't venture off. I feel like there are ways, if you do want to stay committed to your TBR, if you are that person who be like, I want to read these specific books, I don't want to venture off, I want to get this list down because I feel like it's out of control. Okay, there's ways to do that. But if that is too much pressure and you at least know yourself a little bit to be like, yes, I have all these books on my list, but I don't think I could stay committed to all of them, that is also fine. And if you're like me, who doesn't care how big your TBR gets, as long as you're reading and you have all these options in the world, these endless options of books to read, that is fine too. But for those of you who do want to get your TBR down or whatever, there are ways to do that. And I do have a couple of like tips and hacks that have helped me in the past when I was like that. I kind of just, am not thinking like that anymore. I'm kind of just more so in I'm reading for my enjoyment and my purposes. Other influences, be damned. But other people can't be like that and aren't like that, and I don't expect them to either. But if I can just help y'all like breathe a little bit to where you don't feel like you're overwhelming yourself or feel pressured or anything, to get back to that joy and love of reading that we all love, here's some ways that you can do that. So first of all is to know your reading habits. I know it's very popular, especially with a lot of content creators, to make a huge list of books to read for the month or the year or whatever, whether it's for your reading challenge or whatever. But if you're new to reading, like you're brand new, you've never read a book a day in your life unless it was for school or something like that, and you're just now getting into reading as like a new hobby, and you want to read all these books that you keep seeing on the internet, all these like really big and very hyped books, got 5 stars, or whatever, and you make this list and you feel pressure to read all these books as soon as possible. Don't do that. Start small and know yourself when you read. If you know that you are like me, you have a busy life, you work all the time, you find little breaks here and there to try and read, and the most you could finish in a month is maybe 2 books, then start small. Start with 2 books a month and build up the reading habit enough to where you can get to a point where you could be like, okay, let's move from 2 books a month to 4 books a month, to 6 books a month, to 8 books a month. Just build up on it based off of your reading habits and your schedule, right? If you want to make that list of 10 books a month to read, but you end up only reading between 4 to 8 and not the full 10 or something like that, still give yourself a pat on the back. Still be proud of yourself and congratulate yourself for getting through however many books you got through that month, even if it wasn't the full 10. And I would really do want to say this, and this ties into knowing your reading habits, but not overwhelming yourself too much. If you have to take a break or if you have to step away from social media because the pressure is getting to you, feel free to do that. I know sometimes I like to take a break. There will be moments where I'm not posting anything. I'm not on it as much, or if I am on it, it's purely for other reasons, not book-related reasons. If you have to do that, that is fine too. If you have to surround yourself with readers like you who also read like a small amount of books a month or a small amount of books a year, that is fine too. But of course, there are the people you want to see and see their content and see, oh, they read over 100 books a year. I want to be like that someday. That's something to aspire to. That is also fine. And I encourage that, but I don't encourage it to where you feel like you're putting pressure and overwhelming yourself. Because again, reading is supposed to be enjoyable. If you're like me, you added books to your TBR years back, maybe when you were a teenager, maybe when you were a kid, and you're now an adult and you're feeling like, I don't think I want to read that book anymore. Do not feel pressure to keep that book on your TBR. You could take it off your TBR. If it's a digital list like me on Fable or something, go ahead and delete it. If you want to move it to another shelf, just so you don't have to look at it anymore, just like create a separate shelf and be like, books I wanted to read when I was like 15 years old, and then move the books there, that's fine too. If it's like physical books, this is again up to you personally. But if you're willing to donate it or give it to someone you know will enjoy that book, or maybe you have a child, niece, nephew, cousin, young cousin, or whoever in your life who you feel like they might enjoy the book, give it to them. Maybe you could donate it to your local library. Or if you are lucky and you have free little libraries around your neighborhood or in front of your favorite coffee shop or whatever, put it in there. Trust me, it will find a good home. Someone will find it, pick it up, and that might become their new favorite read. You could do that if it's physical. But if it's not physical, don't be afraid to take it off the list, to delete it off the list, or to move it to another shelf so you don't have to look at it anymore and you don't have to feel pressure to read it. Speaking of not feeling pressure to read something, also, if you have a book on your TBR that you actually do start reading, but you're not feeling it anymore and you don't want to read it anymore, or you're not liking it as much, do not be afraid to DNF it. DNF means did not finish. Trust me, there have been plenty of books in my day that I have not finished. In fact, I have a whole separate list of books that I did not finish, either because I was no longer in the mood, or it lost my interest, or I felt like I wasn't enjoying it because I wasn't in the right headspace. I believe in giving books a chance. Like if you have to put it down, walk away and read something else and then come back to it later, that's fine too. But if you just want to hard DNF it and be like, I don't want to read this book, I don't want to finish it, never again, blah, 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 whatever. Again, close it. If it's physical, donate it or give it to someone who might like it or who might enjoy it a little bit better than you. If it's digital, just delete it. It's not a problem. I have 2 books that are hard DNFs that I did donate and get rid of that I will not even speak of because I don't want to bash these books, because other people, when I've spoken to other people about these books, they've enjoyed them. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to bash this book because it has its audience. I just am not a part of that audience. I have those 2 books that I hard DNF'd. And then I have like maybe 10 to 12 books that I soft DNF'd. Like, I started reading them and they're really interesting stories and the writing is pretty good or pretty decent. It's just that I was either no longer in the mood for it, or I wasn't in the right headspace to read it, or I was trying to force myself to read it when I was clearly in a reading slump. And if I had forced myself to finish it while in one of those three situations, I probably wasn't going to enjoy the book as much as I would have if I was mentally or emotionally prepared for it. So I soft DNF them. I want to come back to them eventually. Maybe even start them over when I'm in the mood, the right mood, and continue on with that. But I think you shouldn't be afraid to DNF. And then, of course, you should stay open and stay positive. Yes, reading is supposed to be an enjoyable hobby. Yes, it's fun to commune with other people and build your TBRs together and read together and to have people to talk about the same books with. I get that. Like, you want to read the same books as everyone else so you could be a part of the conversation. And that is fine. But also, even books with small audiences still have an audience. There's someone out there, even if you feel like no one is talking about this book, is so underrated, there is someone else out there reading that book and y'all will find each other, trust me. Especially if you have some sort of reading tracker program or you make book content, or if you're on some sort of like book social media site like Goodreads and Fable. Fable because it reminds me of a mixture between Instagram and Goodreads a little bit. Like, once you finish a book, it asks you to review it. And then you can look at other people's reviews. And if you find someone's review who matches up with the review you wrote, you could probably follow them, send them a message, be like, hey, I noticed you read, A Court of Wings and Ruin and gave it 3 stars. Can we talk about it? Trust me, you're going to find it. Or, hey, I noticed you read this book by this specific indie author who just debuted or whatever, and you also loved it, gave it 4 stars. Can we talk about it? Can we rave about it? Because I feel like no one else is talking about this book and I need someone to talk about it with. You will get response back. Just stay positive and open about it. Stay positive and open with your TBR. Again, this is not a list where I definitely need to read these books before my natural end or whatever. This is a list. This is a menu with endless options that I have to choose from for whatever mood or purpose that I need it to be. A lot of people have to remind themselves of this, that your TBR is just an endless option menu of possibilities for whatever purpose or mood you want it to be. As you read more, you should be growing and evolving with what you read. Here's a fun thing. For those of you who want to stick to your TBR, get the numbers down and everything, find some sort of reward system for yourself, because I know that could be a really, really fun time. I know of one book content creator who is doing this reward system where every time they finish a book, they put like a couple of dollars into like a little piggy bank or something. And then when their piggy bank gets full, they could go book shopping. You could do something like that. Or for every book you finish, you could find some little small treat for yourself. Or you could plan something for yourself. Or you could treat yourself to more books. Since you read and got rid of 10 books, go ahead and treat yourself to 10 more or something like that. I know that kind of sort of defeats the purpose. Like, I'm trying to get my TBR down, or whatever. But in my personal opinion, your TBR should never reach 0. You should not have 0 books on your TBR. You should at least have like 1 or 2 at the minimum. Otherwise, it's no longer a TBR. It's just books you've read. So I wanted to say that because I've been seeing this a lot lately and I just wanted to speak on it a little bit. But just keep in mind, your TBR is your TBR. Be proud of it and don't be ashamed of it. Own it. There's no right way to have a TBR, whether it's like 10 books or 50 books or 100 books or over 500 books or over 600 books if you're like me. It doesn't matter. The whole point is to enjoy the love of reading and to have endless options to choose from for whatever your reading experience calls for whatever mood you're in, whether that's for entertainment, education, insight, whatever it is. And if you do want to start a TBR, of course, don't be afraid to go exploring into your local library or bookstore. Don't be afraid to go on social media and find book content creators to follow and see what they're reading to get sort of an idea of what books to read. Do not be afraid to talk to people who are readers and ask them what have they read and what they recommend and why and this and that. If you want recommendations from me, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to give them so you can start building your TBR. But no pressure or anything. And if you love this discussion and want to continue it in the comment section, feel free to. Just remember, this is a safe space. We're going to be nice. We're going to be civil, and be open to discourse, but polite discourse. But that's it for today. Thank you everyone for listening to me ramble. Be sure to fall back down the rabbit hole again next week for another episode of Aries Bookish Wonderland. Have a good one. Bye.